and welcome to Gefet in the Daf Yomi collaboration between Hadran and Yeshivat Risha. I'm Yael Shimoni, with here to begin learning with you Tosfot and Rashi from Masechet Ta'anit. And we're starting at the 7th Daf Zayin Amud Aleph, where the Gemara is discussing Torah Lishma. This is a Gemara which is a little alarming, and we will see how their learning of Rashi and Tosfot might help us cope with this Gemara on a more easier level emotionally to us as learners. So let's begin. We're starting by an interesting move that the Gemara does, which is not so surprising. We're learning about Ta'anit, we're learning about water, physical water, and we just finished discussing the day of Geshamim, the day of rain. What is the day of rain? The day of rains is the day that after many days of drought in Israel, Baruch Hashem, after we davened and we asked for Geshem, finally water came down. And we're happy with this. And then the Gemara says Rav Yehuda, that the day of rain is as big as the day as the Torah was given. How do we learn that? We learn that from a pasuk in Ha'azinu. Ya'arof kamatar likhi. Lekach is Torah. Ya'arof kamatar, that is the coming down of rain. Hard rain. Hard rain is falling. Hard rain falling is like the Torah coming down from God. Rava says the day of rains is even higher than the day that Torah was given. Okay, Rava's statement is very, very surprising. We're not getting to this because that's not what we're going to learn today with Tosfot. But just remember this when you're learning the sugya. But what we've seen here in the sugya is not really surprising. Why? Because we are used to knowing that Torah and water are connected. And Torah nimshela lemaim, and many times we hear that Torah and water are similar in many respects. So we're not surprised that there is this movement between water and Torah. And therefore, we are willing with our ears to listen to the next stuff that is talking solely about Torah. But now it's not talking about the Torah, the water, but it's talking about the people who are learning, the plants, we, the learners, who are learning Torah. And the Gemara is stating something which we've heard many times, but is very, very, very alarming for anyone who is learning Torah. Says the Gemara the following: Rava Rami. In the pasuk, which is famous in Azinu, there are two contradictions. On one hand, they're saying that Torah is like matar, hard rain, and at the same passage, they're saying that Torah is like tal, it's like dew, which is very, very soft water. So how could that be? Is it soft or is it hard? Says Rava, if the Talmid Chacham is hagun, if he's, I don't know how to say Hagun. Hagun Talmid Chacham, then it's soft. But if he's not Hagun, he's not okay, then it will come down as hard rain falling. This way the Torah will be given. Continues the Gemara and says, a Braita, Rabbi Bana says, any man who learns Torah lo lishma, it's like a death sentence to him. Why? Because if he's learning Torah Lishma, it's like some chayim. It's something that gives him chayim. It's drug of life. And if he's learning it in a wrong way, he will be like a person who's taking poison. And the Torah itself will become poison. How do we learn that? From the word ya'arof kamatar. Not only from the word matar, which is hard rain falling, it's also the name of how it falls, the arof. It's killing. Egla arufa is an egla that you slice its head off. That's how the Torah will be for a person who's not learning it the right way, not lishma. Continues Rabbi Yirmiyah. And with a story that Rabbi Yirmiyah asked Rabbi Zera one day to teach him a Mishnah. And Rabbi Zera said, I'm sorry, I'm tired. My heart is weak. So Rabbi Yirmiyah asks him, okay, give me a halacha, an agada, not a halacha. And then Rabbi Zera tells him something that doesn't make my heart so easy. My heart becomes weak. Says Rabbi Zera, a man is like a tree. How can that be? He's like a tree because, like a tree, if a person bears fruit and he's a fruitful tree, then you have to eat from him and to maintain him. But if he's a Talmid lo hagun that is learning lo lishma, you're not allowed to eat from his fruit. You're not allowed to listen to his Torah, and you should come away from him. So these are three very harsh statements regarding Torah. If we're not learning Torah correctly, three things will happen. A, the Rav, the person who is giving us the Torah, will come down hard on us, and the Torah might kill us. B, the Torah itself will become a poison in our mouths. And C, if we want to teach Talmidim, the Talmidim will not come to us and will destroy us. Why is this so hard, this Gemara? Because the Gemara did not explain what does it mean not to learn Lishma. How do we know? Are we learning the right way? So let's go to Rashi for help. And Rashi is helping us because Rashi is saying, what is Lishma? Lishma is to learn because God told us to, and not to be called a Rebbe. So Rashi on one hand is helping us because we learn Torah because we love Torah. Those of you who are learning after me, we're not learning to be called Rebbes. We're just simple people. We're learning Daf Yomi. So that's why Rashi is helping us, because then we're not afraid from the sugya so much. But on the other hand, Rashi is still hard on us because, can I say, truly, especially for those of you who will try to go to become Gemara teachers, Torah scholars, can you say 100% that you're not also interested to be called a Rebbe or a Rabbanit? Are we really clean of that? Do we really not look for other things? Are we only learning Torah because God told me to? Maybe we want to tell everybody that we learned the entire Shas and not because God told me to. So Rashi helps us, but Rashi is also putting us in a pressure point. Let's look at Tosfot, because Tosfot is saying something different than Rashi. It's actually being holik on Rashi here. Let's start with the kushia, the question of Tosfot. Tosfot quotes the Gemara that says that anyone who doesn't learn Nishma, the Torah itself will become poison in her mouth, and asks the Tosfot the following: how can that be? There's a different Gemara in Pesachim where they say a very famous statement that always a person should be learning Torah lo lishma, because mitoch shelo lishma ba lishma. You should be learning Torah even if you only want to tell people that you finished the Shas. That's okay, says the Gemara in Pesachim. Why? Because maybe you're doing this because you're not 100% holy in your heart, but maybe you will reach the higher parts of learning Torah that you will learn, at least some passages, because God told you to, and you will feel that you're learning not because you're doing this for your honor. If you're a scholar, not because you're going to become a Rabbanit, you're doing this because you love Torah and because God told you to learn Torah. That's Tosfot's question. There's a big difference between the Gemara here and the Gemara in Pesachim. To understand the problem, let's look in the Gemara in Pesachim and read it. Rava there says the following: two psukim in Tehillim. One of them say that the chesed of God is until the sky, and one of them says that the chesed of God is beyond the sky. How could that be? If you learn Torah lo lishma, it's only up till the sky, and if you learn Torah lishma, it's above the sky. And therefore, Rav Yehuda tells us in the name of Rav that always a person should be learning Torah. It doesn't matter, even if it's not lishma. So this is a very strong contradiction between the two sugyot. How will Tosfot solve the problem? Says the Tosfot, I'll tell you why. Yesh lomar. There are two kinds of lo lishma. He doesn't know kimta. Yes, the Gemara is using the same words, lo lishma, but there are different kinds of lo lishma. You can be lo lishma, which is bad, lo lishma, which is not so bad, maybe even good. So it's also what we say that you should be learning Torah, even though it's lo lishma, psachim. That's if you want to be called Rebbe or if you want to have honor, that's okay. Go ahead, learn it. You won't be the top, but you'll get up to the sky, and that's fine. And maybe, mitoch shelo lishma, yavo lishma. And here in Tainit, who is the person who will become poisoned by Torah itself? That's a man who's learning Torah, a man or a woman who's learning Torah to be mekanter. What is mekanter? Mekanter is like lehachis. It sounds as if that's what it's saying. If I'm learning Torah to go against Torah, then Torah will be poison in my mouth. I can understand that. That makes this Gemara much more easier to swallow. I should learn Torah not to go against Torah. Let's look also at Tosfot in Psachim, that he adds a bit more to what it means to be a person which is mekanter, and says Tosfot the following in Masechet Pesachim. Tosfot says that Ri claims that you can also be a person who's mekanter, who's learning lo lishma, not only if you're against Torah itself, but also if you're a person who thinks that he's the best and they're learning to come down at other Talmidei Chachamim. Says the Ri, if you're being yohara and lekanter lekapeach et chaverav ba'alacha, if you're learning Torah in order to understand halacha deeper, or to understand your life, your tefillah, your Torah better, that's one thing. But if you're learning only to become smarter than others and to tell them off and to put down the other students around you, that's also mekanter. So it's not only a person who's against Torah, it's also a person who's against the other Talmidei Chachamim. So actually we learned from Tosfot that there are two people who are problematic, who Torah will become poison in their mouths. If a person thinks that he's against the other learners of Torah and that he's learning to be the best and to debate down at them and to show them that they're not learned and he is, that's a person who Torah will be poison in his mouth. And of course, if he goes against Torah itself, he will have the Torah as Sam Hamavet. But if I'm learning just to have honor, that's okay, says the Tosfot. And in that respect, he is cholek on Rashi. Let's just notice here that Tosfot, what did he do methodologically? He took the Gemara, which was very, very big, and made it much smaller. He moved everything to a smaller proportion. When we learn Rishonim, it's always important to see whether or not the Rishon is taking a Gemara and expanding it, or is he taking a Gemara and condensing it, which is what Tosfot has done. I want to show you that the next Tosfot in the daf is doing the exact same movement of condensing and putting in brackets what the Gemara here, that was very, very, very scary, has done. Okay, so let's look at the next Tosfot. The next Tosfot is dealing with the third thing that will happen to a person who's not learning Lishma. The first, I remind you, is that the rabbi will come down on him and kill him or hurt him, the rabbi, the teacher. The second was that the Torah itself will become poison in his mouth, which is what we learned up till now. But the third is a statement telling students, if you think that your Rebbe is a person who is mekanter, you should leave him and not eat his fruit. And here the Tosfot is asking, is that true? If you have somebody who's great, okay, he's against Torah, and maybe he's really a problematic person in his midot, you cannot learn his Torah, that person's Torah cannot be heard by anyone? Says the Tosfot, that cannot be. How? I'll prove to you, says the Tosfot, because we have a Talmid Chacham who became a very problematic person. We have that person in Chagiga, Elisha ben Avuya Acher, who turned into a person who was a great Talmid Chacham, but he became somebody who was against Torah. And still we have Rabbi Meir running after him to learn from him, even though it's Shabbos. And he's on his horse, and Rabbi Meir is on foot. Still Rabbi Meir goes to learn from Elisha ben Avuya Acher. How can that be, says Tosfot? We must understand that our Gemara has to be condensed. The Gemara is not talking always. Some people can learn even from problematic Talmidei Chachamim. Who are those? Says the Tosfot. Those are other Talmidei Chachamim, because a Talmid Chacham, a true Talmid Chacham, can learn from a person without learning from his deeds. Ezeu Chacham halomed mikol adam, and that's something that a Talmid Chacham can do, because he knows how to eat the fruit and throw away what's not good for him. So Tosfot actually took this Gemara, which said any person who's not learning Lishma will be a person who dies, and it sounded as if a very, very, very big amount of people who are in that category, and it also sounded as if their Torah will be lost forever. But after we learn Tosfot, we see two things. A, there's a kind of limud lo lishma that is not hurting. Maybe it's even good. Maybe it's the right way to start your root on Torah. Even if you're not totally lishma, that's okay. If it's lechavod, if it's letiferet, that's okay. That's okay. We're human. That's fine. That's fine. Bezrat Hashem, we'll also learn lishma. And also Tosfot told us that if there is a problematic person like that, still other Talmidei Chachamim can and should learn his Torah so that Torah will not be lost. So I hope you've enjoyed our learning of Torah in Masechet Ta'anit. This is a very strong opening of the Masechta, this beautiful Masechta. May you continue to enjoy it, and we'll meet again next week. Be'ezrat Hashem. Take care.